We often ask, why do some kids break the law? And maybe more importantly, how do they find their way back? Well, today we're going to dive into that really complex world of juvenile delinquency. But we're not going to do it with a bunch of boring statistics. Instead, we're going to follow one person's journey. A journey that takes him from a single mistake to a choice that changes his entire life. So let's meet our guide for this journey. His name is Marcus. Think of his story as, well, it's kind of like a roadmap. It's going to help us unpack some of the really big theories that try to explain why young people might get into trouble, and crucially, how they can find their way out of it. So, where does it all start? Well, like a lot of these stories, it begins with what looks like a really simple choice. Just one decision, made in a split second, but it's the one that's going to set everything else in motion. Okay, so Marcus is just 14, and man, think back to being 14, right? The world just feels wide open, full of possibilities, and the idea of consequences, that stuff seems like a million miles away. The whole thing goes down at a corner store. And here's the thing, Marcus isn't hungry, he's not desperate for anything. He's just with his friends. There's a dare thrown out, and this shiny new pair of headphones catches his eye. And just like that, he shoplifts sucker. Okay, but what's really interesting here is the logic, right? Let's try to get inside his head for a second. To him, it was a pretty simple calculation. The risk, he thought it was super low. I mean, he'd already cased the joint and noticed there were no cameras. But the reward? That felt huge. He'd get some cool new headphones and, just as important, some serious street cred with his friends. And that right there, that mental math he just did, that perfectly tees up our first big idea, rational choice theory. It basically says that what Marcus did wasn't just some random thoughtless impulse. Nope. It was a calculated decision. A flawed one for sure, but it was based on his own quick, in-the-moment cost-benefit analysis. But if we stop there, we're really only scratching the surface, aren't we? The real story, the why behind that calculation in his head, well, that's way more complex. It runs so much deeper than just one simple choice. I mean, think about it. That split-second decision he made at the counter, it didn't just happen in a vacuum. It was the end result of all these different forces that have been pushing and pulling and shaping his life for years. So let's just peel back the layers for a minute. What was his world actually like? Well, Marcus grew up surrounded by poverty in a pretty high-crime neighborhood. His dad was in and out of the picture, his mom was working like crazy just to make ends meet, and school was a nightmare for him, a place of constant frustration, He struggled with reading, and there's a good chance he had undiagnosed ADHD. All of these things, these are what we call deterministic factors. They're these powerful outside forces that can seriously shape and even limit the choices a person feels like they have. So fast forward a year, Marcus is 15 now, and he's getting in deeper. He's started skipping school, drinking, and when he's with his crew, he feels totally invincible. You can see how this isn't just a one-off thing anymore, right? The behavior is definitely escalating. And this is where our second big theory comes into play. It's called psychological positivism. Now, this perspective shifts the focus and looks at the internal stuff, the drivers inside his own head. For a kid like Marcus, this could mean things like being more impulsive, or maybe his emotional development has kind of stalled out. These are traits you often see in kids who are dealing with really tough situations. And what's so useful about this idea is that it helps explain not just that he's acting out, but how his own internal world is playing a role in all of it. But here's the thing. Marcus's story isn't just some straight line heading towards a tragic ending. Far from it. Because just as life can push you down one path, it has this funny way of suddenly presenting a brand new one when you least expect it. By the time he hits 17, Marcus finds himself at another major crossroads. Only this time the stakes are completely and totally different. And boom, here it is, the one thing that changes everything. His girlfriend's pregnant. All of a sudden, the future isn't just some vague, distant idea anymore. It's about to have a face and a name, and it's going to need a father. Now, we all know change is never as simple as flipping a switch, right? It's not instant. And for Marcus, it was a slow, really difficult turn, a deliberate pivot away from the only life he'd known. And just look at the concrete steps he starts to take. First, the idea of being a dad. That grounds him. It gives him a purpose. So what does he do? He enrolls in night school, he gets a part-time job, and you can see that internal calculation shifting. right? All those rewards from his old life, they're starting to look like massive, unacceptable risks to this new life he's trying to build. This whole process, this is what researchers call his desistance story. It's literally the process of stopping. And it's explained perfectly by our third and final idea, life course theory. This theory basically says that huge life events, like becoming a parent, can fundamentally change a person's entire path. For Marcus, the choice became crystal clear. He just knew he didn't want his kids' first memories of him to be through a pane of glass at a visitation center. And when you look at this timeline, it just lays his whole journey out so clearly. You see him go from this kid making a risky choice at 14 to a teen getting pulled deeper in by his environment, and then, finally, to a young man who's forging a completely new path, all because of this powerful new bond he has with his unborn child. Okay, so what does all of this actually mean? Let's pull all these pieces together in our final section and really get at why looking beyond just the action itself is so critical. Which brings us back to the big question, right? For Marcus, what was it? Was it his choice to steal those headphones, or was it just the inevitable outcome of his circumstances? And the real answer, of course, is it's both. And that's exactly what makes this stuff so complicated. And honestly, if you take one thing away from Marcus's story, let it be this. If we only look at his actions, the what, it is so easy to just slap a label on him and judge. But these theories we talked about, they give us a framework. They're like tools that let us move past the surface level action and really start to understand the why behind it all. And that really just leaves us with this final thought. Marcus's journey is such a powerful reminder that juvenile delinquency is almost never simple. It's this complicated story woven together from individual choices, tough circumstances, a person's own psychology, and importantly, those critical turning points that can offer a real shot at a different future. So it makes you wonder, what might change if we as a society focus just as much on the missed chances as we do on the broken rules?